Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to this episode of What Would You Miss? Today I have a new friend on. His name is Hudson, and I met him through another suicide talk. Funny how that happens. And we connected instantly because we have a lot of the same ideas. And he agreed with me. He's actually said, "You're right," a couple of times. So you all know how much I love that. Hudson, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm well, thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm so glad to be able to talk to you in this space. Can you, you and I just became friends. It's our week anniversary of being BFFs. It's very big. Can you just tell me a little bit about you, what you do, your 2-minute elevator spiel?
Yes, so my name is Hudson Harris. I live in San Diego, California with my 2 sons, and I am a behavioral health system designer. So I work with governments, social service agencies, healthcare providers on how to deliver and create better systems of care. So my real specialty is cross-sector work. So how to bring in things like privacy protections, business justifications, criminal justice, public safety, everything into solutions that really help people get what they need. And then on top of all of that, I bring my technology chops, which is really how to use technology to get to people quicker, help them get the care they need faster, and then really use big data to understand what people are really needing out there. And then on the private side, I do fun stuff, go-to-market work with behavioral health and wellness, patient experience, done some work in artificial intelligence, and it's, I love to design things. It took me, I was 37 years old when I finally figured out that's what I was really supposed to be. So that's kind of where I live now.
Well, I think right now with digital therapy, it's so important what you're doing because that's really the space we're in. It's actually funny because I just was talking to a couple friends, and the way we're cutting funding for, organizations and nonprofits is saddening. It truly is. I'll use our local chapter of the Vera House. It's domestic violence shelter. Yeah. I mean, they had their funding cut almost by half, and domestic violence is up 3 times as much as we've ever seen it, which is really impacting the mental health of our world and our community. It's made such an impact.
Yeah, it's not only the cuts and the increases, but what you're also seeing is an increase in the intensity as well. So it's really like a triple whammy for the people that are involved. I was part of the emergency response in San Diego County for the opening days, the first month of COVID, and the domestic violence was really bad, and it also expanded. Where kids might be out of the house normally, then they weren't. So it really was a time when we need to reinvest into these programs, and unfortunately, a lot of them are taking a bad hit.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think people think it goes away. I saw a post the other day, and it was something like, "School shootings are down." I'm like, they're not in school, so how can they not be down? It doesn't make any sense. And just because, kids are not, they're not, child abuse is not being reported doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It totally exists. And, I've seen in the research that I've done, the suicide rate amongst kids is so high right now. It just kills me because the isolation is really difficult for kids. And so, this is a really important conversation. It's not just about, what you do, but we forget that everybody handles things differently. So grief, we're all grieving for different reasons. Yeah. And we all have to respect that level of emotional support that we need. We all need different things because we're all going through different things. Are you seeing more of that, more of different, types of grief and loss that people are suffering?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's this is the largest grief gestalt that we as a planet have ever had, like that collective consciousness. And it not only is it the largest one we've ever had, but it's also the one where we're the most aware of what's going on around us, and we're able to see more of it. And so we've got an increase in perception, but then also in intensity that at a time when we needed each other most is when we all had to go home.
Right.
And then you really start to see, I think what's also made it particularly interesting is you see a moralization of masks, of quarantine orders and stay-at-home orders, and what happens is that we needed to do those, and other countries peaked and then came down. And the United States peaked and then plateaued. And this moralization and politicization of science, which has been going on in the United States for a long time, but over the past few years has been particularly under assault, has made the situation so much worse. And then when people need help, I think there's a lot more shaming. There's a lot more like,
Totally.
we're getting through this. And like, don't get me wrong, like everybody is, probably done one or two things that's like, oh, I started a yoga studio, or I did some amazing thing, or I baked bread and all these things. And it's like, that's all great. Like, do that stuff. But those aren't people's real lives. Like, people are struggling. Everybody is struggling. Like, it's tough right now. Like, be gentle with ourselves.
No, it's actually hilarious to me because I have a friend who put this post up, and it was actually like a loaf of bread or something. Look at this bread me and my daughter made today. Meanwhile, my son was playing Xbox, and I could hear her screaming at the kids through the Xbox. Get in here! What are you doing? We don't have to post that picture. It just we don't. We feel this like need to do this, and especially right now, I feel like everyone's trying to. I heard someone called it like the Corona game. Like everyone was trying to one up each other. Look what I'm doing. Look what I'm doing. Meanwhile, I keep posting things like, "Didn't clean my house again today."
Yep.
I didn't kill a child, so I must be doing all right. But you know what I actually noticed, and I was thinking about this the other day, right before COVID hit, I actually had started What Would You Miss in October, okay? And it was making waves. It really was. NAMI was sharing it on their pages. So was the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. I was working with Syracuse University, and we were having guests, 3-4 guests every single week. It was fantastic. I had gotten the schools to finally listen to me and let me come in and talk to these kids because, God forbid we actually said the word suicide in front of a, 16-year-old. And then COVID hit. It was like, it wasn't just me. I had talked to a couple of my friends in the mental health space, and we were seeing this change in the mental health community. It was like people were starting to listen to what is needed, and then COVID hit. And I'm so concerned that need is not going to be listened to anymore, that we're just pushing it around again.
Yeah, I mean, we're in such uncharted territory right now. And like what you see in some areas is like, the FCC announced the suicide hotline number, the 3-digit thing.
Yeah.
You see some improvements. I mean, the communities that are looking to reduce funding to police are pushing it into social services, social work, suicide prevention, those types of things. I think unfortunately, putting, I don't know, my realist pants on, I think that, we're years behind. Like, right. I think overall, like, it's just, the work I'm doing with, with some of the government clients I work with, like 2 to 3 years is the recovery period to get everything back, and we won't ever go back, but to get social services back up to the level of participation. And like, even today I was looking at some of the data, and like everybody's bebopping along, and then, and like everything from like, substance abuse, mental health services, everything, utilization just floored out. And I saw what you saw, like there were things were starting to percolate, like things were starting to move. I mean, even on my end, I had a couple of potential clients that were large companies that wanted to open mental health consulting practices within their walls.
Yep.
And all that froze. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that we can pick up the momentum. I definitely think that continuing to do this is really like the jam, because what we got to do is we have to hit now. This is when people need it the most.
Absolutely. Digital space is where we're at. I actually just read that they're projecting anywhere between 75,000 to 150,000 deaths by suicide, drug overdose, and alcohol abuse. That is through COVID. That is a crazy ass number. That is actual bullshit. Like, we need to be doing more. It actually makes me upset. And forget about the drug and alcohol epidemic right now. It's so high with everybody stuck in the house. And I'm going to say stuck. Don't tell me to stay safe in the house. I know I need to stay safe, but to those people who live in an abusive relationship or suffer from alcohol and drug abuse, they are stuck in their house and they're trapped. And I don't think the world really understands that part of it. And again, I'm not negating any of the deaths that were lost from COVID, because it breaks my heart into 1,000,001 pieces. But I think there's a huge part of this that we're just not getting. And I don't know how we can turn around from it. But, organizations like what you're doing and what would you miss? It's a tool in a toolbox. Is this going to solve the world, suicide? No. It's not. I'm not stupid. However, I know because I live with suicidal thoughts that I have to have as much in my toolbox as humanly possible.
Yeah, that was, I think, the thing that really worried me is like I work with my two boys, one of which is special needs, but like I work with them a lot on like emotional fluency and like having a toolbox as kids.
Yeah.
And it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, they ran out. They hit the end of their ability to be around each other, the end of their ability to be civil. Like you could just tell all their coping mechanisms were just blown out. And it's, you look at the healthcare workers, you look at, the essential workers, people working in Amazon and grocery stores, and like the level of PTSD, anxiety, is just going to be astronomical. And like, I don't want to overstate what I'm about to say, but the closest comparator I could have in terms of the scale was like, they've done a lot of research into the descendants from the Holocaust and the impacts on, even at a root DNA level of the stresses and all this stuff. And I think we're probably a decade or more away from truly understanding, just how impactful this was. And the truth is, it's still underreported. Like I talked with healthcare workers here where they had this mysterious pneumonia circulating in October of last year in the US.
Right.
That nobody knew what it was. And then everybody got it. And then there was the flu and then all this stuff. And everybody's convinced they've already had it. And like, they probably did,
Right.
There's just so much, it's terrible. Like,
and not to change the subject, but you said something I think I want to hit on that. You have 2 kids. How old are they?
8 and 5.
So do you talk openly with them about mental health and,
Yeah, I made a point to take each of my sons with me to therapy a few times so they saw it and that it was normal. And whenever they've gone to their therapist or family therapist, I, go with them and I talk about it. And like my youngest son, Anders, is 5 and he's self-managed his meds since he was about 3. And I take my meds when I with him. And in the mornings he wakes up and he takes his meds without being asked. But yeah, very open with him about it.
Yes, I think this is something that our generation is doing well for the most part. We are talking to our kids about mental being and how it goes right inside with physical being and how it's really, really important. Coming out to my kids about my suicidal thoughts and, my attempts and my hospitalization was really freaking hard. Like it was really hard to see the look on their face, but, I can't talk about it if I'm not going to walk the walk. I have to not just preach to the community, but I need to talk to my kids about it, which is so important. They need to, especially now. These kids lost a lot of shit and they've been stuck and they need ways to cope and to deal with things. Yeah.
You have, think of, the high school seniors never got their high school year.
My son, yeah.
There's so much, it's just loss. I feel like loss of innocence is probably not the right trope for it, but there's definitely something there that I think we have to be honest with them. We have to treat them like adults. You look back at the past 100 years and we'd have, a catastrophe or a major event once a generation. Fuck. I've now lived through, I was born in 81. I've now lived through.
Oh my God, there he goes again. He's always got to rub in the fact that I'm so much older than him. I was born in 81.
I didn't say it. But
I was born in 81.
The 3 crashes now, COVID, SARS, the first invasion of Iraq, the second invasion of Iraq, Afghanistan, 9/11. You think about the concentration.
Maybe it's your fault.
It certainly could be. But that concentration is going to wear. And even though we're statistically and historically speaking in a period of relative peace, the catastrophes, they're just going to they've got to hit they've just got to hurt.
Well, this graduating class that graduated, the seniors this year, they came in through 9/11 and now they're leaving the year through COVID. It's just so screwed up. It really is. Tell me 2 things that are in your emotional reserve or your toolbox. What do you do when you're feeling really down and you're feeling that low feeling? What are 2 things that you do?
So my mantra to my kids and to my friends is you have a responsibility to yourself and everybody that you love, that when you feel that way, you have to do the stuff that makes you feel good, even if it won't, even if you don't think it will, and even if you really don't want to do it and it pisses you off. So woodworking is one. I love woodworking. There's something that's really, I don't know, it's not meditative. It's not like anything else. It's just, I can just kind of lose myself in the project, and I can, small stuff, big stuff. It helps my brain get out of the gears into something else. That's one. And then, exercise. I feel like everybody, like, at least at some point, has thought about that. Like, I really tried during the pandemic to stick to my exercise. So yeah, I think woodworking is probably my primary. I love to, so here's everything. I love making chainmail. It's really, really repetitive, and like you have to open all the rings and then close all the rings. And so like I found that like when I was sitting in front of the TV at night just staring, that it didn't, it felt weird. And so I started to try and do things with my hands, and I found chainmail. I'm like, I don't have to look, I can just open. So chainmail is one that's really good for me. And then woodworking when I can. And then I learned to skateboard.
That is cool.
Which was, my youngest son, Anders, wanted to ride his bike without training wheels and wouldn't. And so I made him a deal that I would learn to skateboard if he'd ride without training wheels. And so I finally learned at 38 how to skateboard, and I fucking love it. Like, it's so like,
practice
just
what you preach.
Yeah. Just nice and slow. Yeah.
So you said something that I think is really important. I often say it a lot here, is that you do have to practice those tools when you're feeling like crap. You also have to practice those tools when you're feeling really good, because when you're feeling good and you practice them, you come into that rhythm and you get it. And then when you're feeling like crap, it comes so much easier. I always think it's funny when you're, if you're in a panic attack, and if you don't use breathing and someone looks at you and they're like, just breathe. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Breathing is not my, thing. And also like, oh, calm down. Never in the history of calm down has anyone ever calmed down. They haven't. They just haven't. So I'm going to guess that if you weren't here, you would miss woodworking. That would be something that you would miss.
Very much. I'd miss woodworking. I would definitely it's only happened a couple of times when I've been skateboarding where I hit like a perfect hill, and it just feels like I'm gliding. Like, that gave me goosebumps.
I love it.
Yeah. I think when I've had really, really dark thoughts and really like difficult times, I usually find that, one, my wood shop is an ass disaster because I haven't really been taking care of myself that way. And like 2019 was a kick in the teeth just across the board. Professionally, it was just kind of an ass disaster as well. But like, I lost my 13-year-old nephew to Ewing sarcoma. He was 13 years old in August. I lost my dog of 13 years also that same month. And then I lost 2 uncles, and then I lost 2 friends to suicide right at New Year's.
Oh, that's a lot of loss.
Yeah. And it was crazy. And like, I definitely had one of these moments. I think it was probably in November, where I go, if I don't start taking care of myself somehow, this is going to get really bad. And I went out to my wood shop, and it was just crap everywhere. Like, the boxes and people putting shit, nothing. So like, the first thing I did was clear it out. I didn't make a single thing. Sorry, I just lost my camera a little bit. I didn't make a single thing, but I cleaned it out. And then I started to make again. And then I got into the gym, and those things were the only reason I made it through. Like, it was just terrible.
I think it's really important to point out that you knew enough to get to do those things, though. That's the hard part, is, especially what's going on right now. There's so many people that have never exhibited these signs before, and all of a sudden they're experience like severe depression, anxiety, PTSD, really dark thoughts, and they don't know how to get out of it because they've never done it before. And, for us who have a mental health rap sheet, we know those signs. We know when we need to climb up and, ask for help. It's really important to know that you're not alone. That people are having those thoughts. You just need to ask for help.
And that's, I think, one of my friends that I lost right at New Year's. He was in our field, and he knew all the warning signs. He knew all the tools. He and I had literally built resources together. That might have been one of the ones that made me actually go and start doing something different, because I realized, like, I noticed one change communication pattern wise. And I chalked it up to new work. He had, just been put into a new role. And truth was, he was pulling away from everybody at that
Right.
time. And so, like, that was definitely one of those things that was a wake up call for me when that happened. It was crazy. And that was when I started to really be like, okay, I have to do this. Like, cause I still can't understand how he got there. But I can certainly see the path. You know what I mean?
So I talk a lot about not having any signs because I think that's what we need to be focusing on more. Like you and I could both list off signs to look for somebody who's suffering and who's going into that dark place. It's the people who aren't showing signs that we need to be more worried about because they're in a darker place than we can even understand. And I totally get that because I was in that dark place more than once. When you're almost on autopilot and just trying to go through the motions and hoping that nobody sees it
Yep.
so that you can, complete. And that's scary. You're absolutely right. What you said, it's so scary to know that people can go to that level because you can't help them. And, I think we talked about this the other night, reach out to your strong friend. Yeah, go ahead and reach out to them, but really follow through with it. Don't just say, hey, how are you? And then start talking about grocery shopping. I'm not sure if I think I told this story, but I have a friend who I met through What Would You Miss? And he thought What Would You Miss was so stupid. He thought it was the dumbest thing in the world because he's like, if I'm dead, what would I miss? And then he drank coffee and realized he missed coffee. The point why I'm pointing him out is, he had a great job. He was single. He was like bachelor in New York City. Everyone would just wanted him, and his family went to him. He had a lot of money, so people looked to him for advice, and no one ever asked him how he was. That's fucked up. Like we have to ask people how are you doing today? How's your mental health today? Are you in a good space? And also what I just said is important because we go on autopilot, right? Like, hey, how are you? Oh, you're fine? Okay, good. And then you go about your business. But if you change the language just a little bit, like, hey, are you in a safe space? Is everything going okay? That does make the person kind of react differently.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. I have a group of friends, two of which are in direct suicide prevention care, one of which does advocacy work. And our schedules are all over the map. I mean, some middle of the night, some during the day. And we have this group chat called the Graveyard Shift. And, a little irreverence, but we always check in on each other like that. Are you okay? No, like the actual question, are you okay? Like, what do you need? In one of the darkest times of my life, I was on autopilot. And what I find is, I find that at least this is for me and a few other people I talk with, I think that are in similar positions that you and I are, like, somewhat public facing and pretty open about what goes on, is that I started to self-select what I was sharing. And it wasn't even a conscious decision, but I realized after a while, people didn't know me as well as they thought they did.
Right.
It was, and like, whether, I don't know where the chicken or the egg started, but I definitely realized at one point that like people had a perception of me. And I think they still, in some respects, being any type of semi-public in this type of field, that's going to happen no matter what.
Right.
But I wasn't showing up whole for myself two things I was doing, or to talks I was giving. And like, I think I mentioned this in the night, I was literally having dissociative events on stage. I would watch myself give talks because I wasn't really putting anything of myself into it. And so it almost gets easier to not share what's really happening, and then to just share what people want to hear or what they're there to hear, and then just get on and go back into autopilot or, whatever. And so like, I've really made a point to show up whole. Like that's really like my mantra for this year is showing up whole to, almost everything I do. It's a lot tougher. It's a lot more emotional. There's a lot more like risk and heartache, but like, I feel a lot more present,
Yeah, this is why you and I totally get each other. I can relate to everything you just said, everything. And I actually started saying no to going to things. I was the girl that if you called me up and asked me to go somewhere, yep, I'll be there in a minute. You want to go to a party? Yep, I'll be there in a minute. I went everywhere because I had this feeling that if I didn't participate in things, people wouldn't like me. And then if nobody liked me, then I would just retreat. But in reality, I got a lot of health issues. And sometimes it took 4 hours for me to get ready to go to that party because my legs were killing me or, whatever was going on. And I didn't want to go. Just freaking say no. I mean, that's the other part to it. You know, we say yes to so many things. No is a sentence, and it's okay. And also, I want to tell everyone, you can say no and you don't have to give someone a reason.
Yeah.
We do not have to justify why you don't want to go somewhere or why you do want to go somewhere. You can just want to. That's really, really important. Well, thank you.
But I do want to share something for my first time on the podcast. So 2019 was also the year that I was diagnosed with immune deficiency with Lyme disease. And so I had so then I think the thing that was so scary about that for me is like, I have like a hyper recall memory. I can recall long-term, medium-term stuff with just startling clarity.
Damn, I better watch what I say to you then.
No, you're doing great. But I started to feel this fog, which is one of the symptoms of Lyme, and like this like mental fog, this inability to process, inability to move quickly. And it was one of those things where like, there was no way for me to understand what was happening. Like I knew what was going on, but I couldn't tell, like, am I just tired?
Right.
Did I not sleep? Is it the Lyme? Is it because I didn't work out? You know, what it was, but it was just it was a cognitive decline, frankly. And when I finally got meds, when I finally found a doctor that was able to treat me, like, first off, the antibiotics were just brutal.
I had Lyme, so I totally can relate to this.
And like, even now, like my counts are all fine. Like I definitely feel better. Like nothing is peaking, but like that mental fog was terrifying. And it was, it started some depression. Like it was just, and like, I mean, well, let's go the whole way. Like, so I was watching, you ever seen Mr. Robot?
No.
So it's this show about this guy, Rami Malek plays him, and he has like one personality is his professional, and then he'll black out and he has this other personality. And I was in a professional situation, I was being gaslit. And I had to stop watching the show because my brain was so unable to really kind of cope with that fog. And like, what did I know? Like I had to stop because I was like, okay, this is actually starting to affect my mental health. Like I was starting to associate with the character because that was how I was really feeling. And like, nobody checked on me. Like it was, I pulled myself out of it, but I also realized that like, I didn't really build a network that was going to, because I am the strong friend. Like,
but for the record, Lyme and mental health, like that they've done studies, the rate of mental health issues with Lyme disease is extremely high. Like suicidal thoughts instantly, like it's really bad. It's really bad. So that's our healthcare system flawed, because the healthcare system should have been checking on your mental being. This is chronic illness and mental health are unbelievably intertwined, unbelievably. And you are right, because I see how you are. I see your presence, and you are the strong friend. And I get it. I'm that same person. And when we start to have things that we're dealing with, it's really hard for our friends, I think, to look at us and say, oh crap, I guess I got to reach out to them. And I don't mean because they don't love us. It's not what I mean, but they almost don't know how to do it because we're the ones doing it. So, and also they rely on you, you know, so that's it. And I don't think people understand, like, that's heavy to carry.
Yeah. That was part of the reason that I wanted that my friends, I started the graveyard shift, is like, all of us are the strong friends.
Yeah.
More or less. And like I think the very first time I ever called a crisis hotline, and like, it was one of those friends. And like, it was, oh my God, it was so strange. I was on stage, giving a talk in front of a international data conference on how to use data to prevent suicide, how to use artificial intelligence, how to do predictive modeling in criminal justice settings, like all this stuff. And at the same time, so like my name, at the same time, I have a cousin who has the exact same name as me, attempted. Almost, it was the same day. I'm not exactly sure the exact time, but it was almost simultaneous. And I got off stage just like, man, like, this is great. I still felt a little disjointed. And then I got the call. And it was one of those things where it was just like, holy shit, like I can't even take care of my own people, much less like, what the fuck am I doing up on stage talking about this stuff? And I spent an hour and a half on the phone with my friend. You know, she took me as a crisis call. I had to just be able to talk. And that was I think that was probably one of the very first times I've really reached out to ask for help. Like I just needed someone to listen.
And when you reach out, that makes you even stronger. That's just true. We think that it's a sign of weakness, but it's actually a sign of incredible strength. I have a couple friends, we do an emoji. So we each have an emoji. And if we send the emoji, it means that we're in crisis and we need something, which,
Ooh.
which for strong friends is helpful because it's hard to say, steal it. It's hard to say, I need help. It's really easy to send, somebody in a canoe. They're random ones because I do love emojis. I also have a group text going with I call them my crazies, which is completely not politically correct. And I'm sure we're going to get shit for saying that. But there are 2 schizophrenics and 2 people with bipolar in the chat. And all we do is
I
send
think you
gifts.
can probably say whatever you want. Like
all we do is send gifts. There's no communication in it. And I swear to God, when I die and somebody reads those texts, they're going to be like, what the hell was going on in this group chat?
That's so funny.
It's actually quite fun, every now and then. And it's just really a way of letting things off. And I think it's really turned into this place where we can kind of check in on each other and not really say we're checking in on each other.
Yeah.
We forget during all of this that those with severe mental illness are isolated in ways that they never thought that they would. I actually have a girlfriend locally whose son is autistic and he lives in, an adult home, and she hasn't been able to see him because she couldn't go there. And he's really struggling. Like that breaks my heart in 1,001 pieces. We need to remember that there's so many layers to this. And I hope that we soon can find a way to cope a little bit better.
Yeah. There's something you said there about people are isolated. I think it took me a long time in mental health and suicide prevention to really understand the concept of agency and like respecting people's agency. And the thing that like I've been noticing is that even people who may not have necessarily gone outside a lot or, gone to the grocery store or whatever, when those things were taken away, in a weird way, it removed agency because then they didn't have the choice. Even if it was never a choice they were going to take, it removed the option, which then increases feelings of despair, loss of age, all of those things start to cycle.
Get out of my head, mister.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like,
I work from home, so I don't leave the house. I don't go to an office. Yeah, I had Instacart delivered groceries to me before COVID, so I never left. And then all of a sudden they told me I couldn't go anywhere. And I was like, what do you mean I can't go anywhere? I need to go somewhere. I didn't need to go anywhere. I mean, it was like taking that away from me that I felt like really trapped.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for joining me on this little chat.
Well, thank you.
So glad that we became friends. And I'm sure Rudy's going to watch this and be like, what? She didn't have me on. She had Hudson on first. So sorry, Rudy. I'll get you another time. Just want everyone to remember that if you are in crisis, please text 741-741. And I always tell people too, and this is probably hilarious advice, and someday the crisis line is going to message me. If you don't connect with that first person, try it again. You'll get someone else. I mean, it's all about connecting. And just remember to ask someone you love, what would you miss?